Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of From the Hearts of Men radio show / podcast. My name is Kocysha LaShaun. I am your host and the founder of the Accelerated into Purpose and the overseer of Humbled by His Grace Ministries. As you know, last week or a couple of weeks ago, we started our new season, and I'm happy to bring to you again a new guest who is a father, who is a husband, and he is the brand himself, known as CJ the Empowerment Speaker. I am happy to introduce to you Mr. Corey D. Jones. Mr. Corey, thank you so much for being my guest this season. Thank you for, you have many different things going on. I know you have a podcast. I know you're also an author. So tell us just a little bit about yourself before we get into the show. What do we need to know about Corey? Who is Corey D. Jones?
Yeah, Corey D. Jones, in a nutshell, is an entrepreneur. I'm a 3-time author, 2-time business owner, motivational speaker. I am a graduate, getting my master's degree in clinical mental health. I'm a mental health advocate. What else? I'm just a all well-rounded person. I just love being in the community, love helping individuals, giving back, and helping people become their best self. So I've done a lot of different things in my life. But yeah, that's to sum it up. I'm an entrepreneur at heart.
Awesome. So this season, we're focusing on, again, just to remind you, those who are listening and tuning in, this show is a platform for men to share how God has inspired a transformational life-changing decision in their life. So we want men to share, and we want people to see that God is still blessing men in this day, that God is still using men, that it's good that we have the Bible to look to and to read, but God didn't stop with Abraham and Moses and Joseph. He is still moving and working miracles in the lives of people. So were it not for the hand or the grace of God, Corey, I want you to finish out that statement and just go at it. Were it not for the hand of God, where would you or would not be at this point in time in your life?
Yes, that's a very great question. If it wasn't for the hand of God, I would not be a survivor of trauma, a survivor of abuse, a survivor of abandonment and neglect. I would not be able to work with some of the people I've worked with in my career, such as Les Brown. I wouldn't have been able to record for some of the biggest motivational speaking platforms in the world, Motiversity, Fearless Motivation, Pep Talk. I would not be a 3-time author. I would not be a 2-time business owner. I don't think I would be, where I am today if it wasn't for the hand and grace of God, because I needed his grace to sustain me. I needed his hand to cover me. I needed him to, just protect me from a lot of different things. And what I realized about God is that for me, and I'm speaking personally for me, I don't believe God protected me from a lot of things. I believe he covered me. And there's a difference between covering and protection. I believe God allowed me to go through these things so I can come out on the other side to tell my story and help empower and impact other people through my pain and trauma and the things that I've been through. But I'm so thankful and grateful to God because he's seen me through all those difficulties and adversities. And he allowed me to use my pain points to help heal the world in a sense, and I'm so thankful that I get to do what I love doing every single day, even though I was told I couldn't do this. God and myself, work together and recruit everybody wrong. So yeah, if it wasn't for the hand of God, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now for sure.
Okay, so you brought out a couple of points that I want to kind of touch on. So for one, you mentioned that there is a difference between his covering and his protection. So with the covering, or just kind of give us a little synopsis or maybe an example of what that means to have his grace. So what is it about his grace that allowed you to get to where you are now? Anything specific that comes to mind?
I mean, we know God's grace is sufficient, right? And some of the things that I've done in my life, I know that it was deserving of some very dire consequences. You know what I mean? Coming from childhood into, young adulthood to being a full-grown man now, I know that I didn't always walk the straight and narrow path. And I believe that in that God covered me. You know what I mean? He because of his grace, he allowed me to continue to go on and spare my life, because there's numerous of times I should have been gone, and not even based on things that I've done myself, but because of the environment I was in, the people that, was in close proximity to me that could have ended my life. I believe, but this is the thing, God allowed things to happen to me that I wanted to be protected from, but I wasn't protected from them. But he covered me in the sense that I'm still here, right? He sustained me in the sense that I'm still standing, I'm still able to do the things that I want to do. But I wasn't protected from every abusive situation. I wasn't protected from, the abandonment and neglect. I wasn't protected from those things. I had to go through them, but he covered me and sustained me through them all. So that's why I say there's a difference. In my opinion, there's a difference. Now, people may agree or disagree, but in my opinion, is the way I experienced it. This is what I call it.
Right. And I understand that, which also brings to mind the verse, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." In other words, he doesn't promise us that things won't happen, but at the same time, like you said, things still happen, but yet he covered you through it and you still came out on the other side. And I'm sure you talk to many different people in your profession, and as being an entrepreneur and as a man, what advice or what kind of nugget can you give to somebody who maybe don't understand God, don't understand the grace of God? What kind of nugget can you give to them to encourage them to keep pushing through whatever circumstance they may be going through now that looks dire, that looks like there's no way out of it, but yet and still understanding and trusting in the fact that God will bring them through, or God will cover them? What would you say to somebody who may be struggling with a situation right now and don't understand the grace of God?
I would definitely say you were born on purpose for a purpose, and I believe that whatever state that you're in right now, whether it's a dark state or not, those dark states are they're character builders, right? Because the places where God has taken you, you're going to have to learn how to be resilient and push through, not give up. And in these dark places, that's when you're groomed. You know what I mean? You don't know what you're made of on the mountaintop. You figure out what you're made of in the valley. And so if you feel like you don't deserve God's grace, or, you can never be good enough for God, I want you to understand something. You got to get away from and be delivered from the voice of people, be delivered from the voice of opinions, because that's what held me bound for so long. It's the religiosity. It's the voice of men and women who think they know God the way they say they know him, but they don't know the relationship that you have with him. And it doesn't have to look like everybody else's relationship with God, because they're all different. And so I want you to begin to cultivate your own relationship with God, and you build what it is you want with him, and don't allow someone else to tell you or dictate to you how you should live your life for God, because he called us all to be different. He called us all to be unique. He given us our own gifts, our talents. He imparted some things in us that, he wants us to fulfill. And sometimes people's voices and opinions and ideologies get in the way of what God has you doing, and you second guess yourself. But the moment you get delivered from people and their narratives and their opinions and their ideologies, and really allow God to do what he wants to do in your life, regardless of who it offends and upsets, you're on the right track. And again, you were born on purpose for a purpose. The reason you was born because of purpose, right? And so regardless of where you are, it's a character builder. It's teaching you something. It's teaching you to hold on. It's teaching you perseverance, long suffering, right? And it's not fun while you're in it. The stuff I went through in my life wasn't fun when I was in it. But I do know that I came out on the other side. And because of that, I'm able to stand before you right now today and share these things with you.
Awesome. Also, so you mentioned that you had some issues with trauma in your life, but the different things that you've grown up with, you said that you are now using as your platform. How can people learn how to turn their pain into purpose? A lot of times, and you kind of touched on this, but a lot of times too, we have people have a thing where, how can I trust God who I don't see, as opposed to people that I do see every day who's telling me that I can't do this and I can't do that. But how can you turn your pain into purpose? I know we've heard so many different people say that, so many people have built platforms on that, but how do we take that molestation, that rape? how do we take the physical abuse, the verbal abuse, how do we take those different things, or even neglect or abandonment? You know, sometimes it's not always super bad, but at the same time, it's something that has had a lasting effect on our life and our relationship with different people. So how do we turn that? Give us some, I guess, some practical points maybe of how to turn your pain into purpose, how to look at the silver lining of the situation.
Yeah, I believe it boils down to mindset. You know, a lot of people have this victim mentality. They run in the victim Olympics. You know, we all go through some things in our life. And I know for me personally, a lot of my healing and stuff came through one, therapy. You know, I definitely went through therapy. I know some people say, well, if you go to therapy, that means you don't trust God or whatever. Whatever their narrative is, you do what's best for you. I said, I love Jesus and my therapist, right? Because I believe that God put people on this earth to help us be able to make it through and get through some of these things. And I know some people will pigeonhole you and make you doubt your faith in God if you go to another source that he provided for you to be able to utilize. And so it's just really about your mindset, right? You can look at it one or two ways. This happened to me or this happened for me, right? And sometimes things happen for you to push you to that next phase of your life, to elevate you to that next level. And everybody wants to be on top. Everybody wants, you know, the fairy tale story, but nobody wants to go through the things that it takes to get there, right? Because in order for you to have a real story, you got to go through some things. You see what I'm saying? And some people want to skip going through the things and have a story that nobody can relate to. I didn't want to be neglected. I didn't want to be abused. I didn't want to be mistreated. I didn't want to be lied on and manipulated. I didn't want to be, you know, as a young boy, older women, you know, fondling me and stuff like that. I didn't ask for any of that. But I used those things to be able to do what I'm doing today. And I can have the mentality, oh, well, that happened to me. Yeah, it did, right? It did happen to me. I'm not negating the fact that I've been through these things, but I believe a lot of those things happened for me so I can do and become the person I am today. I believe all those things help shape the man I am today, right? I know a lot about myself based on those experiences. I learned the likes and dislikes. I learned what I want to accept and what I'm not going to accept. I learned, you know, how to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, because I believe bad experiences will help you set healthy boundaries. You see what I'm saying? Especially if you shift your thought processes and say, yeah, that happened to me. I can either entertain that and I keep allowing these things to happen, or I can start setting boundaries regardless of who they are, what they are in your life, and nobody can come in and do those things again. So there's no one cookie cutter answer for anyone, but I will say the victim mentality has to stop because that will keep you in a paralytic state, you know, where you can't move. You can look at it one or two ways. It happened for me or it happened to me. I chose to say it happened for me so I can keep moving on and I not give power to the things that happened to me. And I got therapy. You know, I was in therapy for a while. And so I'm fine. You know, it worked for me.
Awesome, awesome. I want you to touch on setting boundaries, especially for our men. Again, this is a platform for men, and I know men and women listening, but I want you to touch on setting boundaries because a lot of times we are too comfortable in the familiar. You know, some people have grown up in neighborhoods and in environments that they've never been outside of. So all they know is what they've been around. But when a lot of times people get stuck on titles such as, well, that's my bro, that's my mom, that's my family, or that's my best friend, as my ace one or my day one or whatever, you know, a lot of times people get stuck in those things and forget, you know, they don't realize there is more outside of that. So when it comes to setting boundaries, what are some things that they can do? What does that mean to set boundaries, and what are some of the consequences they need to be aware of?
Yeah, I believe just setting boundaries comes to having candid conversations with the individuals around you and who you're looking to set those boundaries for. First and foremost, set boundaries for yourself. And what I mean by that is this: don't allow yourself to go into people, places, and things that you know can cause some type of damage or harm, right? I don't care how close in proximity these people are to you, you set boundaries. You have to set them for yourself so that way you're fine. And then you start setting boundaries for other people. because some people are going to feel like they can cross those boundaries because they have a title in your life. I don't care if it's your mom, your grandmother, your spouse, your children, whatever the case may be. These people feel like they're entitled to certain spaces and certain things in your life. And they feel like because they hold those titles that they are exempt, right, from having to stay behind that boundary. And that's not true. But just know when you set your boundaries, people are going to say you changed up. People are going to say you think you're better than them. People are going to say you're not the person you used to be. You're going to get a lot of different negative backlash for setting boundaries. But people that really understand boundaries and how important they are will be able to relate to that and congratulate you for setting those boundaries, because one is hard. It's hard setting boundaries with people you love because y'all are so close in proximity. Y'all are intimate with one another. There's so many different components and it's not one dimensional, and there's a lot of nuances to it, right? But I feel like once you stamp it home and say, this is what I'm going to do, like the Bible said, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and stand on that. The moment you start to figure and go back and forth, then they're going to see that your boundaries are not really established. And they're going to be able to pull you out of those things that you want to set for yourself. I love it when the scripture talks about the things I don't want to do, I do, and the things I want to do, I don't do, right? Paul was talking, and it's like, you have to do the things that you don't want to do because you know that they're going to be a benefit for your life, right? And sometimes you don't want to set boundaries, but it's necessary for your mental health. It's necessary for your respect. It's necessary for your dignity. It's necessary for you going to the next level in your life. So I don't care what their title is, who they think they are, who they believe they are. You set those boundaries so you can be okay. Because if you don't set them, you can't be angry about boundaries being crossed that you never established or set. Unspoken boundaries don't get you anywhere. Because if you don't speak on them, people don't know. But once you put it out there and say, this is what I'm not doing, and stand on that, and don't go back and forth, the boundary has been set. That's your foundation. Stand on it.
And continuing with that, what were some things that, so sometimes, you know, that we have to stay focused. Focus is important as well. So what were some things that motivated you when you started making those boundaries, when you started hearing that backlash? What kept you motivated to keep pushing to, and, you know, and I want to make it plain too that, you know, wavering comes, you know, that's just part of life. You just want to make sure that you don't allow yourself to waver too much in the wrong way. But what kept you motivated? What keeps you motivated to keep pushing for greater in spite of the obstacles, in spite of the no's, the nays, in spite of the backlash? What's your motivation to keep pushing forward?
Well, I'm intrinsically motivated, to be honest. I believe it's just something that God put on the inside of me, because I truly believe I didn't come this far just to come this far, right? If I was going to quit, I should have quit when those older women were following me. If I was going to quit, I should have quit when my dad walked out on me. I should have quit when I was pushed down those flight of stairs or I was ran over by that car. I should have quit then. I should have quit when it really mattered, right? But I was resilient. And so I always thought to myself, you know, where I am now, it has to be something greater. And I believe exposure is everything. Once I begin to become exposed to other things and different people, places, and things that I can have and I can actually touch, it just kept me going. It's like, don't stop now, because if you stop now, see, if it's not over until you quit, right? You may fall, you may lay down for a minute, but if you get back up and you keep moving, you're still in the fight, right? And I refuse to lay down and say, I'm gonna succumb to this. Like, I'm not gonna succumb to any of this. There's too much. God put me here for a purpose, and I'm going to fulfill that purpose. And one thing that I refuse to do is let the graveyard rob me of the gifts that God gave me, because there's so many gifts buried in that graveyard because people failed to live up to them. They was afraid to take that leap. They was afraid to bet on themselves. And I said, if I don't get me, I won't be God. And that's my mentality every single day. Like, if you want better, you got to do more than what's required. You got to go above and beyond. Some days you're going to have to miss out on sleeping as much as you want to. Some days you're going to have to sacrifice this, that, and the other. But because I've seen that it's attainable, and I've seen that people have it, they're no greater than I am, right? And so I'm like, you keep pushing, because if you want to ever one day taste that and hold on to it and have it in your possession, you know what you got to do. So that's what keeps me motivated. I believe it's just all intrinsic motivation. I believe it's the exposure to a lot of things that I've been able to see in my career, and just being able to experience different experiences. You know what I mean? Going into 5-star restaurants and you're being greeted by your first name, and all these different, it's just, I don't know, it's those experiences like, I don't never want to let this go. I know what it tastes like.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that's what keeps me motivated. And of course, my wife and my kids, they keep me motivated. They keep me grounded. I'm grounded in them, because everything I do for my family. And I want to make sure that they can live a life that I never got to live.
Awesome, awesome. Two things, because I was going to mention the marriage part that's coming up, but I want to go back to something you mentioned that I think is super powerful, because again, people grow up in neighborhoods and they think that that's all that there is to life. I want you to talk a little bit, just expand a little bit more on the importance of exposure. When you are, how can people expose themselves to different things? Like, because honestly, I would have never, I met you through the Black CEO group. You posted something, and that's when I became familiar with you. I think you had spoke at one of their events or something, and that's
Yeah.
how I came across you. So again, and a lot of people that I interviewed last year, and a lot of the opportunities I've had has come through exposure. And I'm an introvert, and it took me a lot to start putting myself out there. But that is, honestly, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be doing this radio show if it were not for that. So I just want you to kind of expand a little bit more on the importance of exposure, and what are different ways people can expose themselves.
Yeah, exposure sometimes costs, right? I had to pay for some things to be exposed. I had to pay to meet some of the people that I met and work with, but it's so much more expensive to be cheap, because if you're cheap, you could never be exposed to some of the things that cost. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I think being exposed is everything. Like being able to see different countries, being able to travel to different states and eat at different restaurants and drive different cars. It's like, if you don't know that you can have these things and all you see is, like you said, what's in your neighborhood, that's all you know. I remember the first time I was exposed to something greater than where I was at. So, I never grew up too shabby. My mom always did the best she could to provide for us. But in that regard, it's like, I need to see more, because I grew up around drugs. I grew up around abuse. I grew up around violence. That's the stuff I saw every single day. It wasn't until I got away from my mom, and not in a negative sense, but I got away from my mom and I ended up moving with my aunt. Now, my aunt lived in a 3-story condominium on a golf course. She drove Cadillacs and things like that. So I'm in the 8th grade, middle school, and I got a chance to see something different than the violence, the yelling, the fighting, the drugs. I got to see something different. But I always knew in me that I didn't want that. But I didn't see that there was another option until I went to move with my aunt. And so when I started living on a golf course, in the 3-story condominium, I had my own section of the house. My aunt bought me my own food, and, the shopping was different. I got to drive the Cadillac to middle school. She would let me out. I would drive, she would get out, get back in the driver's seat, whatever. So when I got to see that, I was like, this is what I want. You know what I mean? And then as I got older, started to be able to travel a little bit, see different cities and stuff, and different states. And I'm like, this is amazing. Pontiac is not everything. That's where I'm from, Pontiac, Michigan. It's a small little place. I said, it's not everything. There's so much more. And the moment I was exposed, I kind of like gravitated towards it. I said, this is what I want for my life. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure I'm constantly being exposed. And then when I got money in my pocket, I met Les Brown. Les Brown is one of the most humblest guys that you're ever going to meet. He's the grandfather of motivational speaking. I was mentored by him. Then I got a chance to get on Pep Talk. I was exposed to some people who had some power. So now I'm on an app with Les Brown, Oprah Winfrey, Will Smith, Eric Thomas, David Goggins. I'm on an app with these people. I share the same platform. I have a speech with Ray Lewis, a retired NFL football player, all because of exposure. You know what I mean? But some of that stuff cost me a couple of dollars, but I was willing to pay that to get more exposed, right? And so it all depends on how bad you want it. It all depends on, what you want for your life. And if you know that, it ain't gonna hurt you to pay a little, a couple of dollars here and there to get where you at.
And I'm glad you said that, because I know, honestly, for me, that was one of my issues when I first started, like the cost. That was an excuse for me, like, okay, I don't have the money for this. So I know there are other people who are thinking the same thing, like, well, you say with an aunt who got money. I ain't got no aunt that got money. I ain't got this, I ain't got that. They make up these excuses and that, and for them, that's all they see. I don't have. So what are some things people can do to make room to start spending money where necessary, carefully, to get exposed to different people, to different conferences, to situations? What are some life changes that you would say that they can make to get around that I don't have enough? What are some life changes they can make?
I think the first thing they got to do is change their mentality. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, tell yourself or ask yourself, how can I afford it? Right? It's those small adjustments. Because if you keep saying, I can't afford it, now you're manifesting, you can't afford it, so you will never be able to afford it. Some of the stuff that I was able to touch, I couldn't afford it at the time. You know what I mean? But I sacrificed. I said, I'm going to make this sacrifice because this sacrifice is going to pay off and it's going to put me in a better position. It may hurt me right now, but in the long run, it's an investment in yourself. If you're afraid to invest in yourself, then you ain't cut out for this, and don't even try to do it, because you're going to have to pay some money. Free can only get you so far. And then the free train express runs out. And now you got to start paying money, because now you got to start touching people where the real money's at. And so it's about changing your mindset. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, ask yourself, how can I afford it? And I like to tell people, you cannot not afford to buy it, because you need it, especially if you want to grow and become something of your life. You have to invest in yourself. You are the greatest investment that you will ever make. You know what I mean? It's not Jordan's, it's not Louis Vuitton, it's not Gucci. Those people's last name was already paid for their family's legacy. You're helping continue to fund their legacy by buying the designer that has nothing to do with you. I'm not saying don't go out and get it, but instead of buying that $2,500 purse or those $300 pair of shoes, take that and start your LLC. You definitely have the money to afford whatever it is you want. The budget may be tight. You may not be able to go out to eat 3 days a week. You may have to go out once. But if you really want it, and you see yourself there, you will make the necessary adjustments to start dumping money in things that's going to pay you dividends, that's going to start getting you that exposure that you need, so you can start working with the right people. I tell people that want to work with me, I want to work with you, I want to work with you. I tell them what my price is. Sometimes I don't hear from them, but guess what? That's not my audience. That's not my demographic.
All right.
I look at it like this. I've never seen a Bentley commercial. You know why? Because the people sitting around watching TV, they ain't advertising to them. So they'll never see the commercial. But people that really want it, I really wanted it, I paid that money to be mentored by Les Brown. Right. You see what I'm saying? I paid that money to get my two businesses started. I paid that money to get my books published. I paid the money to buy the equipment that I'm talking on. Like, I invested in myself, and now it's a write-off.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So it's all about your mindset, and it's about being educated. If you're not educated and you don't have the right people in your corner giving you the right game, then you're going to always feel defeated. You'll never feel like you can become nothing. You'll always feel like you don't have purpose. And that's not true. You got to have a support system.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are almost out of time, but I want you to briefly tell us also, because you mentioned your wife, and I want to make sure we mention that part, because we know that your mate is important when you are in purpose, when you are walking in purpose. How has marriage, how has choosing the right mate, how important is that?
Yeah, choosing the right mate makes a huge difference. And I must be brief with this. Like, I've been with my wife now for a total of 22 years. We just celebrated our 15-year anniversary, though.
Wow.
On the 15th
Awesome.
of this month. And so, we got together when we were 16 years old. And so we've been together for quite some time. Mm-hmm. I didn't know she was the right mate for me. You know what I mean? We had to actually grow into that. Right. And the field that I'm in, I'm an influencer. I'm always out in the limelight. People always see, and I try to distance myself, and I try to stay stuck away, but it just never happens. My wife is always there when I'm feeling, because I have moments of doubt. I'm like, should I do this? Mm-hmm. I have moments of where I feel defeated, like things ain't moving fast enough. I'm not exactly where I want to be. My wife pushes me, she encourages me, and I believe that's one of the points of a woman is to help cultivate a man, help grow a man, help challenge them, help them fulfill the vision that they have that God gave them. Like my wife does that for me. You know, she's like, you can invest in that. I trust your judgment because I know that you have the best interest of the family at heart. So she has been monumental in a lot of things that I've done and touched. And again, I know a lot of people out here looking for, you know, the perfect body and the perfect this and that. And, you know, those things are nice, right? But can that body pray for you when you need to be prayed for? You know what I'm saying? Can that person, you know, body pay for you to get into this door and get into that door? No, like you need somebody to that. Of course, I'm not saying looks are important, right? But at the end of the day, what can this person do for you that's going to help you fulfill the vision that God gave you? And my wife prays for me. She's supportive. She encourages me. She gets on my behind when I'm beating myself up and I'm doubting myself. She said, no, we ain't gonna talk like that. You got 3 published books. You work with Les Brown. You on these 3 big platforms. You've done. She reminds me of the stuff that I've already accomplished when I'm feeling low. And so she's been very monumental, and I'm very appreciative of her. And without her, I don't know if I would have been able to sustain and keep going those moments I was at my lowest point.
Awesome, awesome. Corey, I have truly enjoyed you. You have dropped some major nuggets, y'all. I hope y'all have been listening and picking up on everything that he has said. Before we leave, I want you to please tell us, how can we get in touch with you? If somebody wants to reach out to you, want to work with you possibly, how can they reach you?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website. It's going to be www.coreydjones.com. That's my website. My Instagram is Corey D. Jones. You can find me, and you can email me at cj@coreydjones.com. I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook at Corey D. Jones or Corey Jones. So I'm on all the major platforms. Just reach out to me. But the best way I would say is email, so I can get my assistants to respond back to you. Or you can text. This is another one. You can text the word speak to 54244. The word speak to 54244. That's my mobile app. You can get in touch with me that way as well.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you again so much, Corey, for being our guest on today. And for those listening, just real quick, spell out your name so they'll know, because it's not the regular Corey.
Okay, it's Corey Jones, Jones.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you all for listening and tuning in to another episode of From the Hearts of Men. I hope that you have been blessed by today's episode, and know that, again, if you are feeling defeated in any type of way, tired of the frustration, know that I am here to coach you throughout that process and help you be accelerated into purpose. Thank you again for tuning in. My name is Kocysha LaShaun, your host. And I wish you many, many blessings. Stay safe, be safe, and remember to be a blessing to someone else.